The Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania, and another question and answer session, a bit of an overview of what's been happening. Of course, we're really happy that Loic is now on his way, a gentle cruise through the Southern Ocean, probably sailing right past Coconut on his way to Buenos Aires in Argentina. Going to take him about 30 days to get there. So it was all a very sad moment, and came right on top of when Mark was arriving here in Hobart for the boat shed film drop. So we didn't actually get to see him. Jane and I were stuck in a room all the time trying to manage the situation. And what effectively evolved was that we received a phone call from Loic about 2 o'clock in the morning saying that he had been dismasted in relatively mild conditions. It was only 25 knots, 3 metre seas. And it appears at this stage it was possibly the forestay snapped and the mast folded backwards. That's all he knows, the mast folded backwards. It hit the hydrovane wind vane on the way down, and it was hanging over the side. Now, at the time he made his first call, he wasn't too concerned about the water coming in to the boat. The mast was still partially over the side. He'd cleared a bit of it away and left it hanging as a sea anchor, similar to what RA did when he lost his rig off Cape Town. And he thought he would be able to set up his jury rig in the morning and make his way towards Perth. He was in an ideal position for that. We discussed this, about 600 miles southwest of Fremantle or Perth, and that means the general weather conditions would have been behind him. So that was the plan. Anyway, we started to get everything organised then for what we call a code orange, and put everything into effect. We then notified, or we were in the process of setting up all our reports. You know, when you get this, you've got to type it all up and get everything happening, make the calls to the various people, and also notify the Rescue Coordination Centre in Canberra here in Australia, just to put them in the loop of what's happening. Anyway, just as we were doing all of this, Loic rang again. This was then about, I think it was about 3 hours later, 3 or 4 hours later. And Loic was saying he's got a bit of a, no, maybe a bit longer. He was got a real problem because he couldn't get to this little bit of water that was coming in, and he had no idea what had caught, how bad it was, or whether it was going to increase and so on. And it was coming in at a rate of about 160 litres an hour. That's pretty simple for his pumps. It meant that he had to pump manually every 20 minutes for a length of time to flush it out, and then he could stop and do things. Nonetheless, we discussed the options and thought this could potentially grow pretty quickly. He wanted to turn his EPIRB on, and it was entirely his call. So we then started to gear up for Code Red. I immediately rang Rescue Coordination Centre Canberra and suggested to them that this was the situation. Loic was about to turn his EPIRB on, which he did, and they received it as we were actually on the phone discussing it. And of course, 600 miles out is still a long way, so that set the whole sequence of events in train, where they immediately started preparing to get an aircraft overhead to get a visual on the situation. They started to look at what assets were around, did a Mayday relay to any ships that were around, and there weren't a lot. We also knew that our guys, Tapio and Istvan, they were about 550 miles to the east, and it was really difficult for them to turn around. They were in big winds at the time. There was no way they were going to make a move for at least 24 hours, and then they'd have to battle back. We also knew that some of the long route boats were around the area. We'd spoken to a few of them in the past, and there was one particular guy, Francis. He was a few hundred miles to the northwest of Loic, and for sailing terms that was kind of cool. So while we were trying to put this together with the organisers or coordinators of the long route, RCC had sent the plane down, had a look of the situation. They had basically put a Navy vessel on potential sailing orders, so it wasn't tasked to leave, but it was told it might be required in the next 12 hours or so to depart. And fortunately they found the bulk carrier, Japanese-owned Panamanian registered bulk carrier, nearly 300 metres long, huge ship, that was headed from Geraldton in Australia around to Buenos Aires or in Argentina. And it was able to alter its course a little bit to come down and rendezvous with Loic as well. And the fact then that we were able to speak to Francis and he was quite prepared to come down and assist Loic meant that we had two options. There was a plan A and a plan B, all coordinated by Rescue Coordination Centre in Canberra. But what that meant was that the Navy ship could remain on standby. The Navy ship didn't have to leave. If Francis wasn't available, they would have no doubt tasked that vessel to come down. In these situations, in long-distance rescues, it's important to have two options, because when one gets to the scene, if something goes wrong, you've got nothing left and you have to start again. So I can't stress that enough in terms of Francis' effort. It really did make a big difference, even though he didn't get to actually rescue Loic at the end of the day. So planning went forward on that basis that Francis was going to arrive at Loic's position at about virtually the same time as the bulk cargo vessel, and Australia had organised to get an aircraft overhead again, and it was all set up for yesterday. So the aircraft would be overhead monitoring everything. They had air-droppable survival equipment in case things went horribly wrong at the last minute. The ship arrived, waited until first light. Francis was still closing the scene, but very close. And because the weather was relatively good, about 3 metre swells with 1.5 metre sea and 20 knots, 25 knots of wind, they decided to go ahead with plan A, which was to launch the boat, get it over the side. It's a man overboard recovery boat. So in other words, you have these big ships, 300 metres. They still need a vessel which isn't their lifeboat. It's a Solus approved inflatable with self-righting capacity. Usually, I haven't seen theirs, but this is typical of all those ships. They launch that, and they usually have a 2 or 3 man crew, and it's particularly set up if a person falls off that ship, they can launch that, quickly go back, grab them, and bring them back on board. So I don't know the fine detail of what happened yesterday. We haven't been advised of that yet. We haven't seen anything come back from the captain of the ship and the crew. It would have been tough because these are big ships. The gear's got to be lowered a long way over the side. And then they made their way to Loic, and obviously he was able to be recovered and then brought back to the ship, and no doubt they picked the vessel up and put it back on board. Now we did get one small communication from Loic once he got on the ship, and he just said happy to be on board. He was safe, but it was very tricky. I'm not sure what that means. Lucky not to be injured. No one was injured. None of the crew were injured. So it was successful, and we're very grateful for the captain and the crew of that ship. But then, unfortunately, shortly after, he made a few phone calls to family and everything. The phone went flat, satellite phone went flat, and he can't charge it on board because everything's 110, and he's got to be set up for 12 or 240 volt. But I'm sure the electricians will try and jury rig something for his phone so he can call again, and we maybe get some more information. Anyway, at that point, once they'd recovered him, then Francis was released from the scene. He's now back underway. He's sailing towards Cape Horn, and again, even though he wasn't the one to pick up Loic, if that whole plan A had gone pear-shaped, the only way it would have happened was for Loic to get into his life raft and hang back off the boat on a long rope, and then Francis would have had to have sailed up close to that life raft. Loic would have thrown him a line, and as soon as Francis had that line, Loic would have disconnected from the line on the back of Larland, and they would have then stopped. Francis would have stopped his boat, and they would have pulled in and gone from there. So Francis's effort was fantastic. I mean, we're eternally grateful for what he did, always will be, and it's part of the way of the sea, I suppose. We all try to look after our own mariners and look after our own. So thanks, Francis, top job. Thanks to the captain of the ship, really good. So moving on from that, Mark Slats turned up. It was great. We watched it live on Facebook. I really enjoyed that. We were stuck in our little office here, but happy to see him. And once again, I mean, it's a real effort for the guys to sail up here to get to the film drop. And there was always some mumblings, months and months ago. But there's no question, once they've done it, it's a real boost for them. It gives them another charge of energy. Great for family and friends. Great for sponsors. Great for everyone. We all like to see it. We've got some images and footage and stuff now that we can hopefully get up soon. Some films will be developed. And it's pretty cool, and it's not dissimilar to what Robert Knox Johnson did when he went to New Zealand. He stayed there for many hours, making a connection. Matessia came here off the bottom of Tassie. So next one in the grid is Uku, and if all goes well, he'll be here on Friday afternoon. I think that's what it's looking like. He's going to have a good breeze all the way through. So Uku on Friday, and then Susie, she's going to go quiet tomorrow. Susie's got a bit of light weather, and she's loving that idea, because if you haven't heard her phone call, her last SoundCloud, you want to get onto it. It's an amazing call. she describes in reasonable detail some of the things that happened in that real big blow, where she had to alter course 180 degrees, backtrack to get to the bottom end of it, and she survived. It was really quite a tough call, and to hear that emotion and all the things she did, it was fantastic. Unfortunately, she also mentioned a big problem with her wind vane. Not sure what it is, or whether she'll be able to repair it. Underway. She's waiting for some calm to have a look at it. She's worried about the risk of trying to pull it apart now, and then even having challenges getting here to Hobart. So she may wait until she gets here. She's got a hand steer a bit. It'll steer on a beam reach, but doesn't want to go downwind. And when she gets here, then she's on an anchor and she can play with it, and it's not so bad. She can take verbal assistance when she's here as well. During those sorts of things, any sailor can come in, seek protection in a bay or a cove or something, anchor. People can talk to them. She can get on the radio, get advice, opinions on how to fix it. As long as no one gives her any parts or physically helps her fix something, she's fine. She's still solo unassisted and carrying on in the GGR. So watch this space. It'll be fantastic to see her. Jane and I have decided we need to stay here, so we're here until the 10th of November to get Istvan and Tapio as well. Unfortunately, Christoph's got to go back, but Jesse and Tina are here filming the documentary and stuff, so we'll do all the usual lies and so on from there. The back end of the fleet, Igor had a real challenge. He broke his forestay at the top of the mast. An epic story, which we've been picking up snippets on exactly what happened, but effectively it went something like this. He had 4 hours. He had 4 hours up the mast, okay, to get up there and to try and replace the fittings in the actual masthead fitting. On 2 occasions, he disconnected from the mast, so he's hanging on a halyard, swung out and crashed back into the mast. He's come down from that effort, having succeeded to replace the top end of the forestay, and he's bruised, his hands are really stressed, his feet are a mess. He had to just hit a bunk and just not move, basically. He was completely exhausted. He said he's never had to do anything like that in his life before. He was really scared. He thought he might die. In the middle of it, apparently the sea started to build up a bit, which was flicking him around. And I think he must feel pretty proud of himself, because it sounded a real horror show, a real nightmare. Anyway, he's done it. He's starting to sail a bit faster now. He needs to be able to sail faster than what he has been, otherwise he'll never get here. And we don't know whether it's a permanent fix yet or whether it's still a temporary. It could be permanent, which will be great, and he can carry on. So that was an epic. Mark Sinclair, he's underway, still being cautious, which is fine. Hopes to be here as soon as he can get here, but he knows he's got a long way to go, so he's doing his best. Tapio is enjoying the ride. If you're reading his tweets, you'll see he's having a good time. Still got little challenges, but he's happy. And poor old Istvan, he's convinced that he's got a boogeyman on board, or a hokey pokey, call it what you like, but he's still running out of luck on so many things. The last one, he lost his walker login power, but he's still moving fast. He's sailing really well. He's funny. He's a stop-go guy. When the wind blows up, Tapio just keeps sailing through the big winds and big seas. Istvan tends to slow down. He hove to a few times, and then they're crossing over each other and things like that. So it's interesting to watch the different tactics. And even Mark Sinclair, he's hoving too. I'm not a big fan of hoving too, but everyone's got a different opinion on what to do and how to do it. So, and as for Jean-Luc, he's roaring that way. He's heading towards Cape Horn. And Mark Slats as well, having a great sail at the moment. He's got a bit of breeze coming, but he's enjoying the ride and completely invigorated now, heading into the Pacific side. So all pretty good. So that's a bit of a quick overview. I'll do a tracker overview live maybe tonight, just to give you an update of what's going on. But for now, we'll start going through some of the questions. Just quickly, I had a lot of questions, and I'll try and give you some reasonable answers. Liz, was asking, can you fill up your water tanks during the film drop? And the short answer is no, you can't. You can't get any outside assistance whatsoever. Probably the question is born of Susie's issue. She's getting very low on water now. Peter Mueller, storm-related rigging failures. We've had a few. Okay, and he wants to know whether there's any precautions that you can take, how you manage your repairs, any preventative maintenance, things like that. What I've got to say is the rigs on all the GGR boats are really good. Okay, they were well sorted before They left. We know that. They had independent assessment by qualified riggers to confirm that the rigs were all good. And there's not a lot of preventive maintenance. Most of them were sort of new. Most of these rigs were brand new. If they weren't brand new, they'd be completely re-rigged, pulled apart, checked, put back on board. So they're really good. Then you've got to say, okay, what is it with losing the rigs? We don't know yet. We're going to talk to the sailors. We're going to look at the rigs they had. There's some things that we're picking up already. Ra's rig and Tommy's rigs, and Tommy's watching, by the way. Hey, Tommy. He sent me a message before. Tommy's rig and also Gregor's rig and also Loic's rig, not that it matters the way he's broke, but weren't double sleeved to just above the first spreader. They were all solid sections. We're actually going to do a lot of talking to riggers over the next 6 months or so about this whole subject of rigs to see what we can learn. Whatever we decide, we will build that into the notice of race for the next edition of the Golden Globe, but it won't be regulations, it'll be recommendations. We don't want to get too prescriptive on some of these issues. I'm still happy with what we did to set these boats up with their rigs for this edition of the race. It's a very complicated argument on the issue of why we've lost these rigs, but we're learning some things, and it'll all come out in due course, as into, there'll be a full analysis. I mean, everyone's really interested in what's happening with equipment and gear and what tactics they're using, all these things, and it'll come out in due course. That's the beauty of the GGR right now. Ordinary sailors can benefit a lot from this stuff. So that's the quick answer there. Mark Dyson was also asking about rigs for 2022. What are we going to change? What regulations are we going to change? Especially in the fact that in Australia here, there's some very prominent solo sailors, okay? A lot of them, including Jesse Martin and Jessica Watson and David Dix, and, know them all. But the one of them is a guy called John Sanders. And John did a double circumnavigation, like non-stop in a little SNS 34, and then he did a triple one. He went around 3 times without stopping on Peri Banu, and his rig was amazing. He doubled up on every piece of rigging. So when you got 2 capture out, 1 capture out, he had 2. He had normally 2 lowers each side. He had 4, and it was massive size rigging. He never lost his rig. We built a boat for a guy called Minoru Sato, Japanese guy, great friend. He's done 7 or 8 solo circumnavigations now. The boat that we built for him did 7 of those circumnavigations. He never lost a rig. He was rolled over. He's knocked down probably 30 times or more. The rig's still there. We were using all yacht spars up here, and they were double sleeve certain parts and so on. So there's no easy answer, but there are things we're currently talking about on the interested GGR entrants for 2022 site right now. And this will be a subject for the next 6 to 9 months. So watch this space. There's no easy answer on that one. Athesa Longing. Drogues, carrying and using them. What's the deal? Yes, most of the entrants are carrying drogues. Some have mentioned they've used them. Certainly quite a few have used warps rather than drogues. Gregor used warps. There seems to be a high percentage of people hoving to for some reason. I've got no idea why, but anyway, that's their choice. Interesting story, and again, Tommy's listening to this, he's watching. We've had a few discussions already, just private discussions, nothing to print or repeat yet, but I will mention one comment that he made me, which really, and Tommy's a very good sailor, right? He's been there, done that. When he was in the thick of the storm, the thing that blew him away, he was desperately trying to set his boat up to get it organised. Now, Tommy can use warps and this and that, but he said he had never seen a sea like it in his life. He said it was just white, completely white out, completely chaotic, vertical walls, and he could not get the boat to do anything right. The boat was just getting chucked around something fierce. So I think that highlights the fact, and I'm a great believer that there is no such thing as an instant fix for any situation. I got to say, sometimes I get really amazed at the marketing for series drogues. Series drogues are very good. They're fantastic. Any drogue is very good, fantastic, for certain situations. Some manufacturers of drogues suggest theirs is it's the answer. Just plop your drogue out, go below, have a cup of coffee, and you're saved. I've got to tell you, it's not like that in the Southern Ocean. That's just rubbish. Don't believe everything you read. Every situation is different. right? Make sensible decisions. Don't believe an advert. And certainly some oceans in the world are different than others, but there is no instant fix in the Southern Ocean. Every situation is different. Mark Slatz has got some really interesting stories on what he was doing and what he was observing, and he's trying these different things in the big storm to survive. And in the end, he decided he's better off with nothing, got rid of it all. That's exactly what happened to Matessia. So the important thing in here, I've got to say, it's a big subject. There is no right and wrong. There is no instant fix. Remember that. I get bombarded by people that are just believing this advertising where a manufacturer says, you get my drogue and you just put it out and you go to sleep, have it. Guess what, guys? Don't work like that. So yeah, we're all watching and listening and learning. And at the end of the GGR, I'm sure there's going to be some more information to give people another understanding, remembering that the majority of sailors around the world are not going into the Southern Ocean experiencing what our guys are. So in other conditions, you need a break, put out a drogue, it's fantastic. And so I'm not saying drogues are no good. Drogues are very good. They have their place. But it's, a case of make your decisions on the day. Okay, Kim Revel, what about the abandoned boats? And what are we going to do to change things next time over this edition of the race? For all the things that have happened, like the abandoned boats, you can't do anything. But we're learning and we're watching. What we decide to do at the end of the day, we won't know until we're a couple of years down the track. I'm still confident and very happy with the way all the boats set to sea in the Golden Globe race in this edition. We've now got Gregor's boat still drifting. We're tracking that. We're not sure where Tommy's boat went. The tracker died. Loic's boat has sunk. So that's a reality, and we can live with that. RA was able to get his boat back. The reason Loic wasn't able to get his boat back is because it had a hole in it. So, tricky circumstances all around. But we're learning, and whether we change things or add different things, we'll have to wait and see, because even we don't know at the moment, and there's been no final decisions made. Okay, Alan Morcan was wondering, Moncan was wondering about Susie hand steering during that big blow. What would happen if the boat was knocked down while she's hand steering, or worse, even rolled over? Well, it doesn't take much for the imagination to realise what would happen. You imagine a person clipped on in the cockpit and the boat gets knocked down, big problem. That's if the boat's moving fast, you can get swept out to the extremity of your lifeline. If it's rolled over, you're going to be possibly underneath the boat, possibly come to the back of the boat and pop out at the transom. I mean, it's tough. It could be really bad. But at the end of the day, I've got to say, Susie, even herself, thought she'd done some crazy things by hand steering, and I said to her, "It's not the case at all. You made your decisions at the time based on your gut instinct and how you saw the waves and how you saw the storm, and you survived. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's the essence of it." So once again, it comes down to the skipper at the time coping and doing what they believe is the best at that time, and I think Susie did a brilliant job. So, but yeah, it wouldn't be much fun, being outside and get knocked down or rolled over. It'd be pretty horrific. Okay. Also, he asked another question. Most of these storms and depressions didn't extend as high as 35 degrees south or even 30 south, and wonders whether our 42 degrees south lower limit is too low. Should we bring it right up and let them go across the top of the Indian Ocean or the top of the Pacific? The short answer to that is no. We've got a lower limit. It's up to the entrants to decide where they want to go. They can go up to 35 if they want to sail across there. That's up to them. I think it's sensible to stick with a sailing route plan that's somewhere in the 40s, because that's where the roaring 40s usually are. There's no question climate change is affecting some of the rules down there these days, because Mark Slatz pointed out a very interesting point. Sue Haley went across the Indian Ocean bit in about 45 days. Our fleet's not doing much better than that, even though they're faster boats, because the conditions are different. What I'm watching, I've only done that leg once, it's different. It's hugely different. Istvan's done it twice, and he said it's different. It's hugely different. It's not the time of the year. It's just different. So we're all watching with great interest on that. But yeah, 42 south is very, very ordinary. And I'll bring up another point. If someone is sailing along there and they're getting what I call a serious major storm, we open that up. If they've got to run down south to get past it, we don't penalise them for that. It's a general rule that it's there and to keep them up, but we address each issue at the time. Robert Reynolds. Okay, Robert Reynolds. Loic stopped still to... I'm not sure what that one was. Not sure that one. Tor Forsted. Rigs lost. Any way to stop it? Again, with the rigs, we're assessing all that, and there's a really very healthy discussion going on with about 70 people right now that are all interested in doing the 2022 Golden Globe race, and we're discussing all the things that could be done. Maybe we'll recommend that they do that they have to have an internal sleeve going up to the first spreaders, or an external one, possibly making formed wire, like the old die-form wire, compulsory. I'm a great fan of mechanical fittings rather than roll swage fittings. You can replace them, and they're a lot softer on the wire. There's any number of little things that are being considered. But again, we'll just have to wait and see what goes with that. Okay, Dave Morgan. What causes a yacht to be either knocked down or rolled over? Why would a boat be knocked down, and what's the difference? What's going to make it roll over? It's a tricky subject, but it's happened to me. Both of them. I've been rolled and I've been knocked down, and all these GGR sailors are certainly being knocked down. There's a few different ways it can happen. There's the classic ones where the boats come roaring down a wave, it broaches, goes sideways, and then the wave that it went down on sort of breaks next to it and just pushes the mast down to the waterline, which is a knockdown, or even further down really low. So that's one. Another one, it could be just sailing along with the wind and waves on the beam, and a wave crashes and it hits the side of the boat and just pushes it down like that. So it's not because it's broached and gone surfing down a wave. Another classic, and this is what I think happened to Ari, the boat's just only so big, it's only 10, 11 metres long. If the volume of water it's sitting in and floating in, if that whole volume of water gets picked up and just chucked down into the trough, anything can happen. You get rolled over, you get knocked down, and that happens as well because, you get big waves, and there's nothing that you can do on the boat then to stop that. Doesn't matter whether you've got a drogue, whatever. I'm talking about the whole body of water being physically lifted up and just chucked into the trough. So that can happen as well. You can have the boat, I always talk about the holes that you see in there. It's not the big waves coming up. You look over there and all of a sudden there's this giant hole. It might be 8 metres deep, just appears because it's on a crossover of swell. So you might be, sort of coming along and all of a sudden you drop into that hole and the average stuff comes along and nails you there as well. So there's so many different factors. Within the boat itself, obviously having a lighter rig helps, and that's something that might be helping Jean-Luc. A stiffer boat, the way you packed your boat, loaded your boat. Any number of things, but it's not, it's not hard and fast, but certainly something that's not uncommon in the Southern Ocean. Okay, and he also asked, why did Loic abandon rather than make up a jury rig and keep going? Well, there's a couple of things to that, and only Loic can answer that question, so we should really wait until we hear from Loic once he gets back and talks about it. But in general, from my observations and the quick discussions we had, it's a bit tough. He lost when the mast went down. It knocked out the hydrovane, so he had no self-steering. Similar thing happened to Gregor, by the way. So it means that even with a jury rig up, you've got a hand steer. Okay, not impossible. You can do that for thousands of miles. Plenty of people have. When you're steering by hand, you steer by hand as long as you can. When you've got to go to sleep, you just stop, lash the tiller, go down below and let the boat lay a hull if you have to, and just sleep. The boat goes nowhere for 6 hours while you sleep. You get up, start sailing again, hand steering. People have crossed oceans like that. You can do it, but in Loic's case, he also had to pump, right? So you need to pump every 20 minutes. So think about it. You've got no steering. You've got to pump for 20 minutes. You've got to sleep. You've got to do all these things, and you've still got 600 miles to go. It's all a bit tough. It was Loic's decision. No one knows whether that 160 litre of water coming in was going to increase to 260, 360, 460, or if the pumps kept working, things like that. A lot of variables. So Loic made a decision based on his interpretation of the situation. Once he pressed the go button on his EPIRB, that's all we focus on. And it's a distress. You go to get him out of there. So that's it. Kay Granger was wondering about the success of Jean-Luc and his shorter mast. Do you think others will adopt that principle for the next GGR? No idea. Maybe some will. Certainly they could if they had a rustler, because they could just copy it. If it was another sort of boat, you need to do a lot of testing to see if another design boat's got the same benefits from doing that. John Luke put in a lot of work to do that, spent a lot of money and time, just assessing the whole thing. So, maybe not. Depends. Not everyone wants to win totally like that. Some want to go around for the adventure of it, but we'll have to wait and see. Clive Wales, for dismasting extreme weather, what have we learned? Oh, well, okay, that's again. You can see there's a huge interest in this issue of the mast. What I will say is that someone asked it, I think, what happened to Loic's rig? Now, Loic's rig wasn't a knockdown, wasn't a rollover. It was pure rigging failure. Oh, someone asked the question, which I'll come to in a minute, that Loic stopped in Cape Town specifically to check the rig, get his radio sorted and get some water and things like that. And yet, bingo, all of a sudden the rig's gone. Now, rigging is a tricky thing. You can look at it, it might look perfect, but it could be ready to break. Loic's visit to Cape Town was a precautionary thing to check generally the whole rig. It's still the same rig that's sailed all the way from the Sable d'Olonne. Maybe he missed something. It's really difficult to say. It happens. Maybe he had some sail challenges and so on. No idea. We'll have to wait until we hear from Loic. But it appears that it was the forestay that went, and the whole thing folded back and went over the side that way. Thomas Standers. What changed to step design towards... what changes are we going to make in 2022 to the design requirements of boats to maybe stop some of the incidents that have already taken place? Well, the design requirements are, I'm still really happy. It was kind of cool to see a Beneteau Oceanus 40 with Francis come down and mix it with the fleet of the GGR Une Petite Snail, so a Petite Escargot that Jean-Luc talks about. Just goes to show that you don't have to have any one particular type of boat to be safe in the Southern Ocean. These boats, the Suhaili class, are modelled around Suhaili. They're good, wholesome ocean-going boats. I am still totally confident that they are the right boats for this event. In 2022, there'll be the Joshua class. Let's see how many turn up. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. Who knows? That'll be an eye-opener to see how that goes. Joshua boats are beautiful boats and very capable. But yeah, we'll still stick with the same basic principle of these, quite heavy displacement, conservative boats, long keels, outboard rudders, and so on. And it's interesting, every time I hear an entrant now talking about the boat, they think they're light. Mark Slatz and Gregor and a few of them are saying in the blows, he said, "Wow, these boats are so light, they go so fast," and I'm saying, "Oh, that's a turnaround." So we're not going to change the concept of the type of boats. And that also opens up another advantage, because already apparently, I only heard this from the film drop, Mark apparently mentioned that a lot of the entrants doing this race are talking about doing 22 again, which would be quite interesting. So they don't have to buy new boats to remain competitive. The same boats that we're using this event will be the same boats for 2022, and we'll probably let another 4 or 5 designs in as long as they meet the current concepts. CDs asked about if one of our entrants was to recover another one of the entrants, and they've now got 2 people on the boat, how's the rules work? What happens to their solo non-stop unassisted? Well, the reality is, for the rules of the GGR, it doesn't affect it. They're still in the race. They're still, on the thing. We'll give them time considerations, for the time they've lost to assist, things like that. So, but it would technically affect their solo non-stop unassisted record if they wanted that sort of record. It doesn't change anything with GGR. At the moment, there's, I think, how many 4,000 people have summited on Mount Everest, and 700 people have been into space, and at less than or around 100 people have ever done a solo non-stop circumnavigation. So all our guys are going to be in a pretty exclusive club. And anyway, we'll have to see what happens. But it doesn't affect the rules of the GGR. Jacob Sajay wanted to know, how do entrants climb up the mast? Well, basically they're using they have to climb up and climb down, and most of them, I saw Mark Slatz had a top climber system, standard bosun's chair. It has 2 foot strops that you put your feet into, and it has a little little slider, one-way slider. You slide it up and your feet come up to your chest, and then you stand up. And as you stand up, your chair is connected to a one-way jammer, and it slides up a rope. So you're actually climbing this rope. You're not climbing the actual mast. Okay, you're climbing a rope. And so it's a sit down, stand up, all the way up to the top of the mast. And when you come down, you have to do the reverse. So it's always in control, and you're always climbing this rope. Others are using steps on the mast. They've got steps that you can go up. If they do that, they'll still wear their bosun's chair in case they get flicked off that climbing system. So it's all pretty simple, similar stuff to mountain climbing gear when they're Prusik looping up and down ropes and stuff. And but it's still a tough call. You get banged around a lot. I'd be wearing a helmet and a few other things, but anyway. So that's about it. Thanks. We'll see you again in about a week maybe after Uku's here, and we'll do another Q&A session. Thanks a lot.